President Trump spent part of his weekend attacking the Postal Service from his golf resort in New Jersey. The USPS has been dragged into a political fight over voting access. The service says it needs more funding to handle millions of additional mail-in ballots this November, or they may go uncounted. Weijia Jiang has the latest on the president's response.
From his golf resort in New Jersey, President Trump defended his views on mail-in voting.
The problem with the mail-in voting, number one, you're never going to know when the election's over.
And he repeated his unsupported claim that mail-in voting will lead to fraud, even though he himself requested a mail-in ballot earlier this week.
But now they want to send in millions and millions of ballots. And you see what's happening. They're being lost, they're being discarded, they're finding them in piles. It's going to be a catastrophe.
In Washington, D.C., protesters posted up outside the U.S. Postmaster General's home, worried their voices won't be heard on Election Day. Wisha Zhu said he overhauled the Postal Service to fix its dire financial situation. Now the internal watchdog is investigating after Democrats accused Zhu of working with President Trump to sabotage the mail-in voting process with moves like eliminating overtime.
I have asked the Postmaster General a number of questions. He is not very transparent. He doesn't want to come forward with facts.
CBS News has learned the Postal Service sent letters to all 50 states and D.C. warning their deadlines for accepting mail-in ballots may result in thousands of ballots not being counted. Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris posted on Twitter, "We cannot let Donald Trump destroy the United States Postal Service," adding Congress must step up. Mr. Trump said he would support federal funding for mail-in voting if it's part of a coronavirus relief package that satisfies Republican priorities, too.
For more on this, let's go ahead and bring in Wisha Zhang. She's traveling with the president again in Bridgewater, New Jersey. Wisha, good to see you. So House Democrats are demanding that the leaders of the U.S. Postal Service, including the new Postmaster General, Wisha Zhu, testify at an emergency oversight hearing next week. And today, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said the Postal Service is being undermined by the Postmaster General and called Zhu a, quote, political hack. How is the Trump administration responding?
Well, Zhu himself has not said whether he'd be willing to testify and whether he will, but certainly President Trump gave his full-throated support of Zhu yesterday during his press conference when he said he was a brilliant man who he appointed to fix the outstanding problems with the Postal Service. And he said very specifically that Zhu is not doing anything to intentionally delay mail deliveries, even though there certainly is, a slowing down of mail delivery across the country. And so we have to see what the move will be. Certainly the White House counsel and other advisors have stepped in when it comes to Congress asking for other administration officials to testify. And so it's very clear, though, what the Democrats want. They are demanding answers because of Zhu's sweeping changes to the Postal Service, especially at this critical time, they point out, just months away from the election. And of course, there is growing concern that these delays will impact those ballots that will be in the mail.
Yeah, it is worth noting the timeline on all of this, Wisha. He had just been appointed a few months ago and took the reins as Postmaster General during the pandemic, at a point in which we had already been talking ad nauseum about the impacts on the November election. And I want to follow up with you, too, about something that you asked the president yesterday, Wisha, about the Postal Service and providing additional funds to ensure mail-in ballots would be properly processed by the U.S. Postal Service. What did he have to say to you about your question and your follow-up question about really this being a bipartisan priority? Does he support additional funding?
Well, the president claims that he does. What he has a problem with, he says, is universal mail-in voting. The problem is that the money that the Democrats are pushing for to support the post office, it doesn't say it's specifically for these ballots that are automatically sent to registered voters, which is what the administration continues to air their grievances about. And this distinction is really important because the post office, as I pointed out to the president, those workers, when they're sorting ballots, they don't know whether the ballot was requested or whether it was sent automatically. The bottom line is because of the pandemic, there is going to be a crush of ballots in the mail. And to handle those, they need more money. And so I asked the president, why it matters when those workers are not making the distinction, and a ballot in the mail is a ballot in the mail. And by the way, it could be his own ballot because he has requested one be sent to his address in Florida. And so he says he is open to the money, but he is against universal mail-in voting. But when you're talking about these funds on Capitol Hill, when you're talking about what Democrats are asking for, they're certainly not making the distinction that they only want the money for those handful of states, really, at this point, about 10, who are automatically sending the ballots out. They just want money for the post office and post offices across the country to be able to handle all these mail-in ballots. And so he continued to blame the Democrats. He said, and he's right, that the White House was willing to give $10 billion to the post office, a portion of that which would be specifically going to mail-in voting. But he says the problem is that talks are stalled because he has Republican priorities as well, and they have to come to a compromise. And so at this point, he's saying because that hasn't happened, that portion of money that they're asking for is not available either. But he says he's open to it.
All right. This week, top health experts in the Trump administration issued warnings about where the country is heading in its fight against the coronavirus pandemic. They say that the death toll could reach up to 200,000 in just a matter of weeks. CDC Director Robert Redfield said that this autumn could be the, quote, worst fall for public health. What's the White House's main focus right now on this front?
Well, they're really trying to stress the mitigation measures that they have been talking about now for many months. Wearing masks, social distancing, all the guidelines that we've been talking about, they are stressing. The problem is that we are many, many months into the pandemic. People have adopted their views, they've adopted their behavior, and it's hard to change that, even though you have these experts from the task force out here doing interviews, and that is their main priority, to get the message across for people to listen and to stay at home if they have symptoms, to get tested if they have symptoms, to contact trace if they are positive, to let people know who might have been exposed to it. Aside from that, the president is still really relying on therapeutics and vaccines in the fall to help control the virus. And we know that Dr. Deborah Birx is also going to hotspots, especially in the South, to try to help those local health experts get a grip on the spread. But, a lot of people, a lot of critics are still saying what's lacking is a comprehensive national strategy, because the president made clear from the very beginning that the states and the governors have to come up with their own plans. And so as we move forward, the president continues to tout numbers, saying that they're actually going down, when in fact, we're either seeing plateaus or increases in states. And so it is a tough time, and we cannot lose sight of the fact that there are more cases every day and more deaths being recorded every day.
Well, with all of that going on, Weijia, the next thing might be a little bit out of left field for our viewers. The president yesterday said that he's considering pardoning former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden. What more can you tell us about that and how it's being received by others within the White House?
So the reason the president was asked about this is because earlier in the week he said that, some people think Edward Snowden is being treated very unfairly during an interview. So the follow-up question was, are you considering pardoning him? And he said he was going to take a very close look at that, which is a departure from what the president has said before. In fact, before he became president and was a private citizen, he called Snowden a spy who should be executed. He called him a traitor when he was charged for violating the Espionage Act back in 2013. Now, just as a reminder, Snowden was charged for leaking classified documents about government surveillance programs. So there certainly are two sides to this. Critics of his say that he is a traitor, that he committed treason, while others say that he is a hero because he exposed all of the ways the government surveils U.S. citizens. So this really is an important distinction for the president to now say he is considering pardoning Snowden, which would allow him to come back to the United States. He is seeking refuge right now in Russia and could come back if he receives that pardon. But the president did not commit to that. He just said it's something he's looking at. But we have seen him pardon others before. And, you know, it is important that at least at this point, he's not saying he should be executed. He's saying he could see freedom, which is a big difference.
Yeah, that is quite the pendulum shift to go from believing execution to now a possible pardon, all from the same person. All right, Wisha, thank you.
Sure.